Who will take care of you when you can no longer take care of yourself? The first answer that comes to mind is almost always the same. My children, my partner, my family. It's an answer that sounds good, that brings a certain relief. But what if that answer is wrong? What if it's just a hope and not a plan? For a long time, this issue was treated as a matter of affection, morals, or luck. We decided to analyze this differently, as a data problem, a pattern to be deciphered. For this task, we used the capacity of the Neural Network Artificial Intelligence, NUMA. We fed the system with decades of records on family dynamics, social changes, and the biological effects of aging in different cultures. We wanted it to show us the cold math behind what happens when life starts demanding more from us. The first conclusion the system presented to us was a terrifying concept, something it identified as invisible abandonment. Unlike a loud crash or declared malice, it arrives silently, disguised as "I don't have time" or "I'll call you later," that never happens. It is an abandonment made of visits that become increasingly rare until one day they simply vanish from the calendar. It's the feeling of being surrounded by people who say they love you, but who, in practice, are not there. This script isn't meant to make you feel bad, it's meant to wake you up. This becomes clear when we look at the life of Antonio, a 73-year-old man. Antonio was an engineer his whole life. He built bridges, literally. He raised 3 children, paid mortgages, college tuitions, and weddings. For decades, he was the pillar of his family, the one who was always there, who never failed, who solved everyone's problems without ever asking for anything in return. Antonio told us something that is hard to forget. He said the hardest day of his life wasn't when his father died, nor when he was fired at 58. It wasn't even when his wife got sick. The hardest day was a random Tuesday 2 years ago. It was the day he realized it had been 11 days since any of his 3 children had called him. 11 days? And there was no fight, no resentment. They were just busy. They had their jobs, their own children, their own problems. And the father, the man who had given everything for them, had subtly stopped being a priority to become a task on a to-do list. He didn't say anything to them. He didn't want to intrude. He didn't want to seem needy. So he waited, and when one of his sons finally called, Antonio pretended everything was fine, that he hadn't been counting the days, but he had counted every single one. This is invisible abandonment. It's not being left in a nursing home and forgotten. That is rare, extreme. Real abandonment is much more subtle. It's the gap that grows between calls. It's the "I can't this weekend" that repeats so many times it becomes the rule. It's realizing that you've gone from being the center of their universe to being an obligation on their schedule. And the worst part is that you can't complain, because technically nobody did anything wrong. It's a scenario that repeats in thousands of homes, perhaps even in your parents' house, or eventually in yours. This doesn't happen because people are evil. It happens because modern life was designed for this to happen. For thousands of years, humans lived in massive family structures, 3, 4 generations under the same roof. Grandparents cared for grandchildren. Children cared for elderly parents. It wasn't a choice, it was the system. It was survival. There was a natural reciprocity, a cycle. You care for me now because I cared for you before, and your children will care for you later. But in just 2 or 3 generations, this system collapsed. Families scattered, houses became smaller, and gradually, caring for parents stopped being a certainty and became a problem, a burden to be managed. It doesn't mean things were better before, but there was something missing today, certainty. You knew someone would be there. Today, you have to have hope. And hope is a terrible plan for old age. This hope becomes a terrible plan when we look at the numbers. In Brazil, more than 5 million people over the age of 60 live alone, nearly 1 in 6, and this number keeps growing. In Japan, the situation is so critical that they have a word for it, kodokushi, which means lonely death. It refers to people who die alone in their homes and are only found weeks or months later. Thousands of cases every year in one of the most developed countries in the world. We always think this won't happen to us, that our family is different, that our children truly love us, and they probably do. But love is not enough. Love doesn't guarantee presence. It doesn't pay for caregivers' bills. It doesn't pick you up off the floor when you fall in the middle of the night. It is necessary to understand something fundamental, and this might hurt, but it is liberating. Nobody owes you anything. Your children owe you nothing. Your partner owes you nothing. No matter how much you sacrificed, no matter how much you gave, they don't have a debt to you. The sooner you accept this, the sooner you can build a life that doesn't depend on others paying a bill they never signed. There is a mental trap that almost all of us fall into. We asked Numa to analyze communication patterns in families where resentment arose in old age, and the system identified a recurring pattern, a logic failure it called the love contract trap. The logic works like this. I give you love, time, money, and sacrifice. At some point in the future, you will give it back to me in the form of care. We don't say this out loud, nor do we think it consciously. But this unsigned contract is there, operating in the back of our minds. And when the time comes to collect and the other person doesn't pay, we feel betrayed. But think about it. Did you ever tell your children that you were going to raise them, pay for their studies, and in exchange they should take care of you when you got old? No, the contract only exists in your head. Your children didn't ask to be born. What you did for them, you did because you wanted to, because it was your responsibility, and because you loved them. But turning that love into a future debt is unfair to them and dangerous for you. We learned about the journey of a woman, Carmen, who understood this too late. Carmen dedicated her entire life to her 2 daughters. She gave up promotions at work to spend more time at home. She paid for their studies, their first cars, the down payments on their apartments. She was there for every crisis, every breakup, every birthday. She was the perfect mother, the one who was always there. When Carmen turned 70, she started having mobility issues. Nothing serious, but she needed help with some things. She called her daughters. Her daughters truly loved her. They weren't bad people, but one lived 400 kilometers away and had 3 small children. The other worked 60 hours a week in a high-pressure job. Both said the same thing. Mum, we love you, but we can't right now. Carmen felt betrayed. After everything she had given, her daughters weren't there. For months, she was resentful, crying alone at home, feeling used, discarded, as if she had been just a tool to raise them. And now that she was no longer useful, she had been thrown away. The moment Carmen began to improve was when she stopped waiting for her daughters to pay a debt that never existed, when she understood that the love she gave was a gift, not a loan. And her daughters had the right to live their lives without the weight of a mother who expected to be rewarded. Carmen realized she had the responsibility to build an old age that didn't depend on anyone. It wasn't easy. She had to let go of years of expectations. She had to face the reality that she was alone and that it wasn't anyone's fault. But when she did that, something changed. The anger went away. She started looking for solutions instead of culprits. And ironically, her relationship with her daughters improved because there was no more debt, no more tension. There was only love, a clean love, without invoices. But the reality of loneliness isn't just sad. It literally kills. And when we say it kills, It's not a metaphor, it's pure biology. In 2010, a massive study analyzed data from over 300,000 people. The conclusion was alarming. Having few social relationships is as dangerous to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It is more dangerous than being obese and as harmful as being an alcoholic. Loneliness is a slow-acting poison that destroys the body from the inside out. But why? Why can a feeling have such a devastating physical effect? The answer lies in our evolution. For millions of years, a human being alone in nature was a dead human being. We didn't have claws, fangs, or speed. Our only weapon was the group, the tribe. Together, we could hunt, defend ourselves, and survive. Alone, we were easy prey. Because of this, our brain developed a primitive and extremely effective alarm system, the fear of exclusion. To your brain, the pain of being socially rejected is processed in the same areas as physical pain. When you feel alone or excluded, your brain doesn't distinguish that from being punched or breaking a bone. It interprets isolation as a mortal threat to your survival. And how does the body react to a mortal threat? It goes into emergency mode, releasing cortisol, the famous stress hormone. Cortisol is useful if you need to run from a predator. It accelerates your heart, tenses your muscles, and prepares you to fight or run. The problem is that in the modern world, the predator never appears. The threat isn't a lion that goes away after a few minutes. The threat is the silence, the empty house. The phone that doesn't ring is a constant threat, and so cortisol continues to flow day after day, month after month, year after year. A body flooded by chronic cortisol begins to self-destruct. Blood pressure rises, and the immune system that should protect you from diseases becomes suppressed. Digestion is altered, sleep is interrupted, and the damage to the brain is especially cruel. Cortisol kills neurons in an area called the hippocampus, the structure responsible for memory and learning. Have you ever wondered why older people who are alone seem to deteriorate faster, lose their memory, or become more anxious? It's not just age, it's the poison of loneliness doing its silent work. But the investigation goes further. To understand the neural architecture of loneliness, we asked the artificial intelligence to analyze 40,000 MRI scans, looking for a pattern in the brains of people who felt chronically lonely. And it found something fascinating. There was a notable difference in a specific brain network, the one that activates when we're doing nothing, when we daydream, think about the past, or imagine the future. In lonely brains, this network was hyper-connected. It was as if the brain, deprived of real connections with the outside world, turned inward, creating a more intense internal universe to compensate. But this isn't a good thing. This internal hyperactivity is linked to repetitive thoughts, rumination, and depression. The lonely brain is a brain that devours itself. If you analyze your last week, how many real conversations actually happened? Not text messages, not work emails, not social media likes. Real conversations, eye to eye, or at least voice to voice. Conversations where someone asked, "How are you?" and actually wanted to hear the answer. If the answer is few or none, ironically, you are not alone in this. We live in the most connected era in history, and at the same time, the loneliest. We have hundreds of online friends and no one to call in the middle of the night. And this only gets worse with age. When you are young, life forces you to socialize, school, college, work. But when you grow old, these structures disappear. You retire, friends get sick, children have their own lives, and suddenly you find yourself with infinite hours and no one to fill them with. But the damage goes even deeper than stress chemistry or brain structure. It hits the clock that counts the time of your life inside each of your cells. To understand this, imagine your chromosomes as shoelaces. At the ends of each lace, there's a small plastic piece that prevents it from fraying. Your chromosomes have something similar. They are protective caps called telomeres. Every time a cell in your body divides, these telomeres get a little shorter. It's a natural process. When they get too short, the cell can no longer divide correctly. It ages, stops functioning, and dies. Telomeres are literally your body's biological clock. The longer they are, the younger you are at a cellular level. The shorter they are, the older you are. And here is the crucial part. The speed at which your telomeres shorten is not fixed. It is not determined solely by your genetics. It is directly influenced by how you live. Revolutionary studies led by researchers who won the Nobel Prize for this work showed that chronic stress, isolation, and lack of social support drastically accelerate the shortening of telomeres. To verify this connection, we asked Numa to analyze thousands of genetic samples cross-referenced with the life histories of the participants. The pattern was unmistakable. People who reported high levels of loneliness had significantly shorter telomeres than those with strong social connections. In other words, loneliness makes you age faster. You can eat well, exercise, and not smoke. But if you are chronically alone, your cells are aging at an accelerated rate anyway. Now let's talk about something you see every day, but perhaps never fully understood: the mental rigidity of older people. That tendency to cling to the same opinions, to reject what is new, to repeat the same stories, the feeling that they have stopped learning. The easy explanation is to say, it's just an age thing. But that's not true. Age doesn't make you stubborn. What makes you stubborn is a brain that has stopped adapting. And there is a neurological reason for this. Your brain has an ability called cognitive flexibility. It's what allows you to switch from one task to another, adapt to new situations, and see things from other perspectives. This function depends mainly on the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain right behind your forehead. It's what makes us human, and it's also one of the first areas to deteriorate with age. But the key point is that this decline is not the same for everyone. People who maintain active social connections, who converse, who are challenged by new ideas, maintain their cognitive flexibility for much longer. The brain is like a muscle. If you don't use it, it atrophies. And one of the best ways to exercise it is by interacting with other people. Remember Antonio, the engineer we spoke about at the beginning, the man who built bridges and raised 3 children. When we met him, he had been living alone for 2 years since his wife passed away, and he confessed something that embarrassed him. He said he had become a person he didn't even recognize. He got irritated by small things. He had stopped reading because he could no longer concentrate. When his children visited and told him about their lives, he found himself thinking about something else, unable to follow the conversation. Antonio wasn't becoming unintelligent. Antonio was feeling the effects of a brain deprived of social stimulus. His cognitive flexibility was deteriorating, and the worst part is that he noticed it. He saw himself changing and didn't know how to stop it. He believed it was a one-way street, and for a long time, science thought the same. It was believed that the adult brain was fixed, that after a certain age we could only lose neurons, never gain them. But this proved to be completely false. Our brain has an extraordinary capacity called neuroplasticity, the ability to reorganize itself, to form new connections, and even to create new neurons. The damage, at least in part, can be reversed. The brain can recover, and this discovery completely changes the rules of the game. The fascinating thing is that one of the things that most stimulates neuroplasticity is precisely social interaction. The damage that loneliness causes can be partially reversed by its antidote: connection. The conclusion that Numa revealed with this data changes everything we thought about aging. The decline we associate with old age is not an inevitable sentence. It is, to a large extent, the result of how we live. And there is concrete proof of this. There are places in the world where people age in a completely different way, where reaching 90 or 100 years old with a clear mind and energy is the norm. These places are known as blue zones. There are 5 regions scattered across the world: Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Ikaria in Greece, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and a community in Loma Linda, California. Totally different cultures, climates, and diets. But when researchers analyzed what they had in common, one pattern stood out above all others. In none of these communities do people age alone. In Okinawa, for example, they have a concept called moai, groups of friends who form in childhood and commit to taking care of each other for a lifetime. An Okinawan is never totally alone. He has his moai. In Sardinia, families live together or very close by. Grandparents care for grandchildren, children care for parents. It isn't seen as a burden, but as the natural flow of life. The pattern is clear. Social connection is woven into the fabric of their daily lives. It isn't something they have to look for. It is the default. But researchers found something else, something perhaps even more important than social connection. In all blue zones, people have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. In Okinawa, they call it ikigai. In Costa Rica, plan de vida. The translation isn't perfect, but it means purpose, the reason why you exist. And we're not talking about grand missions to save the world. An Okinawan's ikigai might be tending to their garden, teaching karate to the village children, or cooking for the family on Sunday. What matters is not the size of the purpose, but the fact of having one. To quantify the impact of purpose, we asked Numa to cross-reference data from thousands of studies on longevity. The result was mathematical. Having a clear purpose can add up to 7 years to your life expectancy. 7 years. Not just living longer, but living better. People with purpose have less depression, better cognitive function, and more resilience. Purpose acts as a shield. The problem is that modern society has robbed us of many traditional sources of purpose. Work has become just a way to pay bills. Community has unraveled, and family has scattered. When you retire, when the children leave, a huge void can appear. And a brain without purpose is a brain that starts to shut down. We met a woman, Isabel, who was a school principal for 30 years. Work was her life. When she retired at 65, she thought she would love the rest. The first few months were good, but then she started feeling useless, empty. Her days became identical. She started forgetting things, confusing dates. The doctor said it was age, but it wasn't age. It was the absence of purpose. Isabel's daughter realized what was happening and convinced her to give tutoring lessons to children with learning difficulties. She started with one student, 2 hours a week. Today, 5 years later, Isabel is 73 and works 20 hours a week as a volunteer tutor. Her memory improved, her energy returned. She has reasons to get up. What happened to Isabel has a name. Her brain had suffered a reduction in activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for planning and goals. Without goals, this part of the brain falls asleep. Purpose woke it up. Her brain wasn't permanently damaged, it was just dormant. The blue zones show us that another way of aging is possible, and purpose can be the fuel that keeps your brain running. But how do you build this? How do you prepare for an old age that isn't a sentence? The answer to that question isn't in the future, it's in the now. Old age isn't an event that happens suddenly, it's a result. It's the consequence of thousands of small decisions you make throughout your life. Every time you cancelled a plan with a friend because you were tired. Every time you stopped calling someone because life got complicated. Every time you chose the comfort of the sofa over the effort of maintaining a relationship. You were building your old age, brick by brick. You just didn't know it. The good news is that you are still in time to change the project. The bad news is that time is passing faster than you think. Building a safety net for the future takes years. Deep relationships are not manufactured in months. They are cultivated over decades. And every year that passes without cultivating them is 1 year less in your deadline. I'll be direct. If you are 40, you have about 30 years to build this net before old age truly arrives. 30 years seems like a lot until you remember that the last 30 flew by. If you are 50, you have 20 left. If you are 60, you have 10. And if you are 70 or older, you are late. But late is better than never. So, where to start? After analyzing the profiles of thousands of seniors who aged successfully compared to those who didn't, Numa identified 3 pillars of independence that were non-negotiable. 3 areas you need to strengthen now so you don't depend on anyone's goodwill in the future. The first pillar begins with your financial autonomy. I know it sounds obvious, but I'm not talking about being rich. I'm talking about not depending financially on your children for your basic needs. Because economic dependence creates a situation that poisons relationships. When you depend on someone to pay your bills, no matter how much they love you, the relationship changes. You feel in debt, they feel trapped, and love mixes with obligation in a way that no one wanted, but no one can avoid. Financial autonomy isn't selfishness, it's love. It's saying to your children, I want you to visit me because you want to see me, not because you need to pay my bills. I want to free you from the burden of my survival so you can freely choose to be with me. This opens space for the second vital need, which is having your own network of connections. This is more subtle, but equally vital. It means having important relationships outside of your family. Friends, community, people who know you and wish you well and who don't share your genetics. Why? Because family, no matter how close, has limits. Your children have their own lives, their own problems. They cannot be your only source of social connection, even if they want to be. If they are, the pressure on them is unsustainable. Think about your life right now. If you took your family out of the equation, who would be left? Do you have real friends or just acquaintances, people who would notice if you disappeared for a week? If the answer is no one or only my family, then you have work to do. And that work starts today. And finally, the hardest of all, emotional self-sufficiency. This means not needing constant validation from others to feel good about yourself. It means being able to be alone without feeling lonely. It's having a relationship with yourself that is sufficient to sustain you in the moments when no one else can be there, because those moments will come. No matter how good your network of friends is, no matter how solid your economy is, there will be nights when you can't sleep and there will be no one to call. Mornings when the house is empty and the silence is heavy. And if you can't stand your own company, those moments will be hell. Emotional self-sufficiency isn't about not needing anyone. It's about not desperately needing someone at every moment. This is built by cultivating interests you can pursue alone, reading, walking, creating something with your hands. It's built by learning to like your own company, not as a consolation prize, but as something valuable in itself. These pillars build a strong life, but they lead us to face what we fear most, the end of this life. It's necessary to look at what we fear most. Everything we've talked about so far, loneliness, abandonment, the deteriorating mind, all of it scares us for one single reason. We are afraid of dying. The fear of aging alone isn't fear of loneliness, it's fear of dying alone. The fear that no one will take care of you isn't fear of abandonment, it's fear of dying abandoned. Death is underneath everything. It's the monster in the basement we pretend doesn't exist, and as long as we don't look at it, it will continue to control our lives from the shadows. Stoic philosophers 2,000 years ago had a practice for this. They called it memento mori. Remember that you will die. They reminded themselves of this every day, not to become depressed, but to set themselves free. Because when you truly accept that your time is limited, something changes. Small fights lose their meaning. The pride that prevents you from asking for forgiveness dissolves. The fear that paralyzes you weakens. To understand what really matters in the end, when time runs out, we fed Numa a different kind of data. Thousands of palliative care records and testimonies from people in their final days of life. We asked the system to find the patterns, the regrets that repeated the most, and the analysis revealed 5 themes that appeared with overwhelming frequency. The first and greatest regret was the wish to have had the courage to live a life true to oneself, not the life others expected of you. On their deathbeds, what people regret most aren't the mistakes they made, but the life they didn't dare to live for fear of what others would think. The second was the wish to have not worked so hard, decades sacrificing time with family, with friends, with themselves, to accumulate money that in the end serves for nothing. Because at the end of life, you don't take the car, or the house, or the titles. You take the memories, and if your memories are of an empty office at 10 p.m., that's what you have. Next came the wish to have had the courage to express your feelings. All the I love yous that were kept inside, all the apologies that weren't made, all the truths that were silenced to keep the peace. In the end, these unspoken words weigh more than anything else. The fourth regret was about staying in touch with friends, the relationships we let die out of laziness, pride, or lack of time. The people who could have been by your side at the end, but who disappeared because you didn't keep them close. And the fifth, the wish to have let oneself be happier. People who spent their whole lives postponing happiness. When I retire, I'll be happy. When the children grow up, I'll be happy. And that day never came. These regrets don't appear out of nowhere. They are built day by day. Every day you spend living according to the expectations of others, working more than you should, silencing what you feel, neglecting your friends, and postponing happiness. You are building the weight you will carry at the end. The question I asked you at the beginning of this script is still in the air. Who will take care of you when you can no longer take care of yourself? But now I hope you understand that the question was wrong. It's not about finding someone to take care of you. It's about building a life where that question stops making you afraid. Because if you build the 3 pillars, your financial autonomy, your network of connections, and your ability to be with yourself, then the question changes. It is no longer, who will take care of me? It becomes, how do I want to live the years I have left? And that is a much better question, a question that gives the power back to you. I don't know how many years you have left, no one knows, but I know that every day that passes is one day less, and what you do with those days will determine how your story ends. You can continue as you are, waiting for the phone to ring, risking living the same 11 days of silence as Antonio. Or you can start today to ensure that your phone rings because people want to hear you, not because they need to rescue you. Build something that doesn't depend on anyone, something that is yours. If you liked this investigation, your subscription to the channel and any donation value help us expand Project Numa. We would love to read your reflection on the subject of the video in the comments and your suggestion for the next topic to be addressed. Tell us which city you are following us from. Thank you for your company. Until the end. M.